There is a fatal mistake we all make in 24-hour laundromat. We only watch the front door. If you're ever completely alone in a laundromat at 3 a.m. and you see a faded, out-of-order sign taped to one of the massive dryers, pack your things and leave. You assume a broken machine is just a piece of dead metal. You don't realize there is a 3-foot, pitch-black maintenance void running directly behind that wall. An unlocked hatch straight into the room. Last week, I trusted the deafening roar of the spin cycles to keep me safe. I had my back turned when the heavy glass door of the broken machine, right next to my head, started to push open from the inside. The problem with these places is the cycle count. Doing laundry is an act of subconscious mathematics. You know exactly how many shirts went into the drum. You know how many pairs of socks should come out. But what do you do when the math suddenly doesn't add up, and the missing piece is handed back to you by someone living inside the walls? The dashboard clock read 2:15 a.m. as I drove down West 5th Avenue in Gary, Indiana. That stretch is tucked right against the North Side manufacturing corridor, a concrete desert of windowless warehouses and rusted cooling towers. At that hour, the only thing moving is the distant, fiery glow of the steel mills. I was pulling a double shift and was out of clean clothes, which meant a run to the wash tub, a brutalist concrete block, sitting alone in a cracked, asphalt parking lot. I pushed through the heavy glass doors with my bags. The place felt like a pressurized chamber. It was just me, the harsh overhead lights, and the sticky feeling of decades of spilled detergent. I walked past the smaller top loaders and headed straight for the big boys on the back wall. These 80-pound front loaders are monolithic blocks of steel, anchored directly into the concrete with heavy bolts. I loaded my darks into washer 6 and my whites into washer 7, fed the slots, and hit start. The machines locked with a heavy, electronic thud, and the water rushed in. I sat down in a molded fiberglass chair, put my headphones around my neck, and prepared to wait. For the first 20 minutes, everything was normal. The machines hit their high-speed spin cycles, and the concrete floor vibrated. The roar was absolute, like a jet engine warming up inside a submarine. But right around the 30-minute mark, the rhythm changed. I was staring at my phone when I felt a distinct vibration travel up the legs of my chair. It wasn't the chaotic shaking of an unbalanced load. It was a singular, heavy impact. I looked up. The reflection of the laundromat, mirrored in the front windows, showed nothing moving. Washers 6 and 7 were spinning violently, but the sound hadn't come from them. It sounded like it had come from the dead space behind the drywall. That's when I remembered the layout of these brutalist buildings. The massive 5-foot maintenance void running behind the bulkheads. A hollow, pitch-black tunnel where all the plumbing and exhaust vents run. A space the public is never supposed to see. I sat completely still. A minute passed. Then, I heard a sharp, metallic clack. The unmistakable sound of a heavy steel latch being unbolted. But with the deafening roar of the spin cycles echoing off the tile, the sound was distorted, impossible to pinpoint. I told myself it was just the pipes. Old plumbing knocks when the pressure shifts. I forced myself to look down, trying to ignore the irrational sensation that the architecture itself was watching me. At 3 a.m., The wash cycles finished with a sharp beep. The sudden silence was almost more oppressive than the noise. I frantically hauled the heavy, wet clothes directly across the room to the back wall, where the massive front-load dryers were stacked. I loaded my whites into dryer 14. It was the only functional, high-capacity unit left. The one right next to it, dryer 15, was dead. It had a curled, yellow, out-of-order sign taped to the glass. While the interiors of the other machines caught the harsh, fluorescent glare, dryer 15 was a pitch-black, cold, metal cavern. I dropped my quarters and started the heat. I spent the next 15 minutes pacing the sticky floor, too exhausted to process why my heart was beating so fast. The air grew thick and humid, smelling of hot cotton and scorched lint. Finally, the clock rolled over to 3:17 a.m. The dryer cycled down, the drums spinning to a halt. I grabbed my empty basket, opened dryer 14, and leaned in. A wave of intense heat washed over my face as I blindly reached to the very back of the deep metal drum to grab a handful of hot undershirts. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a pipe. It was a heavy, agonizingly slow, metallic creak. I froze, my hand still gripping a hot tangle of laundry. Slowly, I pulled my head out of dryer 14 and looked to my right. The thick glass door of the broken dryer 15 was slowly being pushed open. It wasn't swinging on a loose hinge. Something was pushing it from the inside. A pale, dirt-caked hand, shaking with a violent tremor, reached out from the pitch-black void of the dead machine. Long, filthy fingers curled around the outer edge of the metal frame. My brain simply refused to process the physics of what I was looking at. Slowly, a man unfolded himself out of the broken machine. He pushed his shoulders through the circular opening, his joints loudly snapping and popping as he contorted his body out of the dark. He didn't look like a customer playing a prank. He looked like something that had been permanently compressed into the filthy, hidden maintenance tunnel behind the wall, and had just unlatched the back access panel to crawl through. His skin was the sickly, translucent color of a bruised mushroom. He smelled overwhelmingly of hot machine grease, scorched cotton, and the sharp, sour stench of old sweat. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, fixed directly on my face. He didn't lunge at me. His movements were incredibly slow, deliberate, and entirely casual. He leaned halfway out of the machine and held out his free hand. Pinched between his pale fingers was a single, white, athletic sock. "You dropped this," he croaked. His voice sounded like it was being squeezed out of a completely dry sponge. "It fell behind the folding table last week. I've been keeping it warm for you." Terror is a strange feeling. When pushed past the brink of panic, your body sometimes defaults to a sickening, automatic politeness, just to survive the moment. I didn't scream. I just reached out, my hand trembling violently, and took the sock. My fingers brushed against his. His skin felt like damp, cold parchment. A horrifying contrast to the sweltering heat radiating from the dryer right next to him. "Thanks," I whispered, my voice breaking. He didn't say anything else. He just stared at me, his chest rising and falling in shallow, rattling breaths. I shoved whatever was in my hands into the basket, abandoned the rest, and backed away slowly until I hit the doors. Then I bolted. I threw the basket into my truck, hit the locks, and peeled out of the lot. I didn't check my rearview mirror as I sped down West 5th Avenue. I just kept my eyes locked on the road. I didn't look back until I had driven the 6 miles back to my apartment, sprinted up the stairs, and through the deadbolt. I locked the chain and cleared every room with a kitchen knife in my hand. The apartment was empty. I was safe. I walked into my bedroom, dumped the half-filled basket onto my mattress, and desperately wanted to go to sleep, to convince myself it was just a hallucination. But as I reached for that white athletic sock, the one he had handed me, directly from the darkness of the broken machine, I stopped. I realized it wasn't empty. The fabric felt much heavier than it should. It sagged in the middle. I slowly reached my fingers inside the cotton tube and pulled out a small, jagged piece of cold metal. It was a house key. I recognized the brass grooves instantly. It was the spare key to my front door. The exact key I had lost inside my own locked apartment 3 weeks ago. The one I assumed had simply slipped down behind my heavy oak nightstand. I looked down at the white sock still resting on the mattress. Inside the heel of the fabric, stitched tightly into the cotton with a clumsy, thick red thread that absolutely was not there when I bought it, were 3 numbers. 402. My apartment number. He hadn't found that sock on the floor of the laundromat. He had brought it with him from my bedroom. He wasn't just living in the walls of that laundromat. He had been watching me for weeks, learning my routines, taking my things, and waiting for the perfect moment to prove to me that he wasn't just a stranger in the dark. He was following me home. So, if you've ever found something in your bedroom that wasn't supposed to be there, I want to hear about it in the comments down below. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications to join the graveyard shift. We have a lot more stories to cover, and as always, thanks for listening.